The Global Longevity Summit is taking place between the 28th and 30th of October 2025 in Geneva, Switzerland. Now, the theme of this event is Mastering the Aging Clock, the Science of Longevity, and it's under the banner of transforming your practice and patient care. Now, the event is really an unprecedented assembly of the world's most respected leaders in longevity, science, health, innovation, and anti-aging medicine. Now, Dr. Joseph Raffaele has been practicing longevity medicine for 25 years. He's published clinical studies in telomere biology, epigenetics, hormone therapy, and glycobiology. He's also the CEO and CMO of the software company he co-founded, PhysioAge Health Analytics, which enables longevity practices around the world to practice precision N-of-1 longevity medicine more effectively than perhaps traditional EHRs. And he joins us here today. So, Dr. Raffaele, welcome.
Thank you, Phil. It's a pleasure to be here, talking about a subject I'm really excited to talk about.
Yeah, so obviously, Geneva's coming up fast. A lot of buzz building around the actual conference. So, what will you be talking about when you join us in Geneva?
I'm going to be on a panel talking about how one might use biomarkers of aging in your clinic, how to sort of think about them, what are the pitfalls, why we need them to practice longevity medicine. And I truly believe that to follow patients, because you're treating aging, you need to have a way of measuring aging. So that's one panel. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what's new in longevity, ask me any questions about how you practice and what's exciting you these days.
Yeah, well, of course, we're going to be jumping into this whole subject now of biomarkers, which, as we all know, isn't really over the line as a theme, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of work still going on in the space. And I saw on your platform, you aggregate a lot of very interesting biomarkers together as part of your analysis of your N-of-1 approach. But maybe if we just sort of wind back a little bit, you've been in the industry for a while now. What are the sort of most interesting changes that you're seeing in longevity medicine now? Obviously, before your practice, obviously you've been in it for a while, but obviously you're across a lot of the science as well. So what are you seeing in the dialogues at the moment that longevity clinicians should be aware of, specifically in biomarkers?
Well, I think, specifically the hot ones have been the epigenetic clocks. And I think that we've been a little focused on the high R-squareds around them, predicting chronological age, which, as we all know, if you can predict that perfectly, it's kind of useless because we already have chronological age. And so we went through a phase where, the highest R-squared was the most important. But I think we lost sight of what we need the clocks for, which is to predict whether or not where somebody is in an aging process, but also the effectiveness of the therapies that you're treating in the near term, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and 3 years. And there are many different kinds of clocks that can do that. And so what I'm excited about now is that we're moving not away from them, but incorporating multi-omics into it, and omics to include the tried and true ones like FEV1, arterial stiffness, VO2 max, and body composition, and things that we know have very hard endpoints for mortality and disease-specific things. So I'm seeing a more rational approach to using these really interesting molecular clocks, but integrating them into a bigger picture. Because when I do them all on all my patients, I see a lot of disparity between an age that one gets from one clock versus another clock versus FEV1 or hand grip. And some people say, well, that means that these clocks are useless and nobody really knows what they're doing with them. But the truth is they're measuring different things. We're getting different information from them. And we have to now start to think about how to put them all together in our therapeutic protocols that we're trying to use to slow aging.
Yeah, and of course you do that in your platform, right? So, I mean, that's very interesting. Obviously, you've made some choices as to how you decide which ones to put into that. So you mentioned the fact that, of course, there's not sometimes the correlation on the readings is different. Do you feel that this multi-strategy approach gives you a stronger picture than just, somebody doing one test as they may do? Obviously, epigenetic, test is one measure of the DNA methylation, but of course, there are many others as well. So, does the aggregation of that give you confidence, or does it tell you still that we've got some work to do for everybody to be able to line up better on these things?
That's really the sort of the fundamental aging biomarkers of aging question now. And I was talking to Irina Convoy recently about her new test, which we could talk about as well. This idea about whether there's a unitary aging process is really sort of the question that you're getting to, and is there a right answer for an individual? And I think, I wasn't at the meeting, as you mentioned earlier, off camera, but when Dr. Gladyshev mentioned that there's clocks for different organ systems, I see all the time that in each individual, your organs, one organ is aging at one rate, another organ aging at another rate. And there may be other processes like levels of estrogen or inflammation or telomere length that cut across multiple different organ systems. But you see a different measurement in one, probably because of genetic reserve that the person has, lifestyle, stochastic events that take place. And you're getting just, I think, a better, fuller picture of what the weaker organ systems are, be that from lifestyle or events or poor genetic inheritance versus just the overall aging process. And so, you'd see one strong system, another weak system. I mostly see a very wide mosaic. I rarely see somebody that I do 9 biomarkers from molecular to cellular to a full organ system level where they're all within 2 or 3 years of their chronological age. Don't see that very often. People have strong systems and weak systems. And so I think the more you measure, the more you learn about the fullness of a person's aging process.
And maybe let's just lean into, you published studies on telomerase activation and telomere biology. So, those are some of your expertise. You mentioned the work that you've been working on with multiple platforms. Do you see with your published work a correlation now between some of these key markers where some people are still on the fence about telomere length? Is it a biomarker or is it something you can adjust, right? So interested to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I've been measuring telomere length in my practice since 2007. Probably looked at 3,000 telomere lengths in 1,000, 1,500 patients. And there's this whole question, is it a good biomarker? I mean, telomeres had their moment in the sun as well before the epigenetics came along. But I think the problem with telomeres is 70% heritable, and you can be 40 and have a telomere length of a 7-year-old and vice versa. The real issue is telomere length attrition loss, telomere length loss, telomere length attrition over time, and that's where you need longitudinal data. And I track that in my patients. One really interesting thing I saw is that when someone goes from CMV negative to CMV positive, you see a significant change in their telomere length, a shortening of it because of the massive redistribution of cells to sort of make that infection latent again, an increase in senescent T cells, which is, after all, where we're measuring these things with these clocks and with the flow cytometry. So I see that. I've seen, and I haven't published it yet, but I'm really looking to do that. I have patients that have been on different kinds of therapies, TA65 being one of them, a telomerase activator, that can maintain the same telomere length and even increase it somewhat over a decade. And then we come up to 2020, and all of a sudden it drops off a half a kilobase in patient after patient after patient. And guess what that is?
COVID, right?
COVID. Right. And COVID just has this massive effect on your immune system, and it then makes it difficult to interpret some of the other biomarkers that we're following long-term, like senescent cell load through either P16 mRNA or through expression of CD28 or lack of expression of CD28 or other markers on flow cytometry. So it's very complicated.
It is,
but,
yeah.
But I do see, what I look for in a biomarker is it stable if nothing's changing? And if something is changing, does it respond to that in a way that makes biological sense? And that's, I think, what we really need to use as the sort of standard for whether to implement it into a practice or not.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about PhysioAge Health as a platform. I'm very interested that there are so many longevity clinics now emerging. They've got their own secondary market, right? So you're leaning into that secondary market with your platform, and of course, you're in a form of competition with others in the space. But obviously, one of the key things is your N of one approach, right? So I guess I'd be very interested to understand obviously how you get to the N of 1 data, and then how that is manifesting itself through the people that are licensing your technology and then helping those patients or clients with their own health span journey.
Well, I mean, hopefully everybody that's using these systems are taking an N of 1 approach, because each of us is really unique. I think the difference between most of the other platforms and PhysioAge is the breadth of markers that we incorporate into it, and then also the heuristics for the patient and the physician, who may not have as much experience, to sort of aggregate things with a grade point average for multiple systems, so that you can get an overall view of the health of your cardiovascular system, the health of your immune system, your body composition, and then also integrating proven biomarkers of aging with R-squareds above 0.5 into an overall PhysioAge, which is, I'm not saying that that's the end all and the be all, but it is a way to think, am I making progress overall for people to see? And so what patients want when they come to see me or any other physician that's practicing longevity medicine, which is what Bob Butler kind of beat into me when I had an early roundtable with him in about 2001, the founder of the National Institutes on Aging. He said, look, if you're going to institute a therapy, don't just ask the patient whether they're feeling better or whether friends think they look better or, they have a little bit more energy. You have to know whether it's beneficially affecting every organ system that's important. I mean, they're all important, but the most important ones, benefiting them, because it may be benefiting one but hurting another. I mean, I think there are multiple interventions that can do that. Everybody's going on senolytics or rapamycin now. I mean, now I measure in my practice senescent cell load through P16 mRNA expression, and there are quite a few people who have very low senescent cell loads in their 50s, 60s, and beyond that probably don't need to lower it and might be doing them a disservice if they did that. It's about 30%. And so that's the N of 1 approach, but you only get there if you do the measurements to know how someone's different. I'm really finding some interesting things where if you're an ApoE2 carrier, we know that that's great for reducing your Alzheimer's disease risk, but it seems to be great for overall aging as well. Multiple biomarkers being better, pace of aging correlating with that from the need and pace of aging. So that's what I recommend is as broad a picture. Now it gets expensive. That's unfortunate because these markers are not inexpensive. But I think that's how we forge the science forward by looking at these things. And then the way our system's set up is all our clinics aggregate data so we can look at what's happening in real time, real world, longitudinal longevity medicine. While it's a little messy, it is, I think, the way to know whether things are actually working.
That's great, because I was going to ask you the question about, obviously, the fact that AI is everywhere, as we all know now. So are you able, with your system, to aggregate anonymized data to see what the effects are happening there? And just rolling back to the previous point we were just discussing, are you seeing effects of GLP-1s in patients now? Are you seeing what's happening with their biomarkers as well, or is it too early to say for that?
Well, you're certainly seeing the biomarkers move that you think will move, like A1C and body fat and all that sort of stuff. It is, I think, probably a little early to see whether there's an effect on telomere length, on senescent cell load, at least with the numbers that we have currently. And I haven't looked at it systematically yet, though. And I'm still on the fence as to whether there are effects beyond the caloric reduction and the fat loss. Is it helping patients who have excellent body composition, excellent insulin sensitivity, are exercising, doing everything else right? Is it helping them or not? That's the same question as with metformin. We still haven't really answered that question. There are putative molecular mechanisms by which they may well be doing that, but I think it's still too early to know for sure. Although people that are overweight by a lot and have a lot of visceral fat, the benefits are, just manifold.
Yeah, and I guess just coming back to the AI point then. So, you've got this power of the data that you've got in your systems. Of course, everybody needs AI guardrails. You can't have replacing doctors at this stage. But is there a feedback loop in the system where that information is coming back to help you with some of the perhaps clinical guidance that you're offering to then have the clinicians take those forward to clients?
Yeah, we've done traditional bioinformatics on our database, and some of our overall biomarkers of aging are based on that data, like the cutometer that gives your keto age. That's based on our data set. I have not yet integrated AI into looking at our database, as a small language model, and then giving real-time results, recommendations to patients. There are protocols in there, and I'm about to enter in an agreement with one of two, I don't know yet which, groups to move in that direction, because I think that's the way longevity medicine is going to get out to a larger group more quickly, by using those models. Not necessarily the large language one, but if you have a large enough database, you can start to see what's working and what's not working, and produce recommendations for how to deal with an initial data set, and then response to the therapeutic protocol that's been put in place.
Yeah. We did a longevity clinics survey. We did it last year, but we published it this year, and it's very interesting that there was an overwhelming percentage of doctors that were very open to sharing anonymized data with other doctors across platforms to be able to enhance client care. So obviously, you're at the sharp end of being a clinician as well as running a software platform that is available to other clinicians. So, Joseph, what are you seeing now in the space? I mean, obviously, we see a lot of clinics coming in. There are lots of questions now about training programs and accreditation and things like that. How do you feel about the overall state of the industry as it stands right now?
Yeah, I think what's happening right now is you're seeing a lot of very interesting forces. I mean, you're seeing the direct-to-consumer movement, with all these labs being offered at a really low price from Function and Superpower, et cetera, inside Tracker. But what happens at the longevity doctor's office, or even at the primary care doctor's office, is the patient brings those labs, and then they say, well, what do I do with this? And that's not being offered out there. So, and I have clinicians coming to me all the time saying, we do a mentorship, can I come sit in your office? And I think what's missing is we have the power to grab lots and lots of data about patients, but then how to understand it, how to put it together and put it in practice is really what's missing. And that's what I'd like PhysioAge to be. I mean, we have about 30 clinics using it around the country and around the world. I'd like to grow that to 1,000 or 10,000, where we can then understand what each clinic is doing, what's working, what's not working, and then do live case studies, because I can immediately pop up on the screen in a Zoom call, like in a grand rounds, an anonymized data set of an actual patient from a doctor who has a question about it, and then other doctors can talk about it, and it can be a learning experience. Because what I've found over the years is that you can go to as many conferences as you want. On Monday morning, when you're sitting in front of the patient, that's where it's, deer in the headlights, where, what do I do with this? And that's where they want some expert to help them. It could be AI backed up by a group of experts that are available. So I think that's where it's going to go if it's actually going to start to really cause a change in how we're treating patients. And it won't be all AI, because obviously there's, somebody has to take the blame if something goes wrong, and it's not going to be AI.
Yeah.
But I think the system that can do that will be the one that can really move the field forward. And I'm hoping to move into that space with PhysioAge. Great.
Well, obviously, Joseph, we're going to see you in October, and really appreciate your time today. And obviously, when you're going to be doing panel sessions, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And in terms of the next steps for your organization, how can people find out more about your work?
PhysioAge.com. PhysioAge.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well, under by name, and Instagram at Raffaele MD, Raffaele MD.
Great. Well, Dr. Joseph Raffaele, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's mine, Phil. Thank you very much.